So let's get on with the climate hat trick for this week. Three big stories brought to you with my insights around a climate and sport lens. And don't forget, links to all of these stories are in the show notes as well. So story one, climate change is breaking sport's business model. So we always talk about sport like it exists in a controlled environment. This has been the case for a long, long time. The same pitches, the same tracks, the same locations, the same rules, the same conditions? Maybe not. So what happens when conditions stop being predictable? Because right now, something bigger is starting to reshape sport, not just on the field or on the track or wherever it's being played, but behind the scenes where the investment and where the money is. So to give a bit of context, a report from the World Meteorological Organization launched recently says the last 11 years, from 2015 to 2025, have been the hottest ever recorded. And more importantly, the planet is now further out of balance than in any time in recorded history. The ocean has been absorbing about 18 times the annual human energy use each year for the past 2 decades. So that means over 91% of the extra heat that we're creating is being stored in our oceans. So what we're seeing now, the heat waves, the storms, the flooding, unfortunately, that is just the surface. Now, here's where it becomes a sports story, because sport doesn't just rely on incredible talent and athletes, whether you are at a grassroots amateur or the top of your game in elite sports. Sport doesn't just rely on that talent, it relies on certainty and predictability. And that, unfortunately, is what is disappearing. So let's start with major events. Let's, for example, take the FIFA Men's World Cup this year that is coming on the horizon quite closely. What happens with mega sports events? Host countries put their hats in the ring, or discussions are had about where mega sports events in the future are going to happen. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer global host cities are putting their hats in the ring these days because of the costs. That's a different story. But then the host bid countries or cities are judged on their infrastructure, their fan capacity, their venues, etc. But now, more and more, the climate risk is becoming part of that conversation. So environmental factors like heat, water availability are often a critical part of the decision-making process and a mandatory component in the bidding process for modern mega sporting events. But these tournaments are planned years, sometimes up to a decade in advance. And as we've seen from this report, and as we're hearing from climate scientists, the impacts are worsening even more quickly than many scientists predicted. So what we're already seeing is tournaments shifting schedules, adaptations being put in place to adapt to, for example, heat. And that's not a one-off, that is the beginning of a trend. It has been happening sporadically for a long time. We are now seeing it happen more and more consistently. So let's follow the money, because this is where it gets interesting. For investors, climate change is becoming a hidden variable in sports valuation. So if we think about it, stadiums are long-term assets, broadcasting deals rely on fixed schedules, and sponsorships depend on guaranteed exposure. But what happens when matches or tournaments get delayed? What happens when they get postponed? What happens when they get cancelled? Suddenly, that revenue stream becomes less predictable. And in business and in sports business, unpredictability equals risk. Clubs, leagues, governing bodies are already feeling it. For example, lower league football clubs in places here like the UK are exposed to flooding and extreme weather with fewer resources to adapt. And that creates a widening gap. Bigger sports organisations can invest in climate-proof infrastructures. Smaller ones have to absorb the disruption. But even as we've seen examples, even bigger clubs that can invest in that climate-proof infrastructure, it is not infallible. In 2023, we saw major sporting events on the eastern seaboard of the United States have matches postponed for indoor arenas because of wildfire smoke drifting down the eastern seaboard from Canada and the air quality being so low that sport organisers couldn't encourage people to travel to the games and leave their homes because the air quality was so low. So let's remind ourselves that even if you are in a sport where you have an enclosed venue, even if you have the finances to adapt, it doesn't mean you can cover every possible iteration of what's happening. Even broadcasters aren't immune to these shifts. Live sport is built on scheduling certainty. And if extreme weather starts disrupting fixtures more regularly, that is going to have a direct knock on viewing figures. If that has an impact on viewing figures, it's going to affect ad revenue and it's going to affect global audience as well. If we zoom out even further, events like the Olympic Games are facing the very real question that we've seen recently discussed at the Winter Games in Milano Cortina. How many cities in the future will actually be able to host games, either safely because of extreme heat in the summer or with the adequate resources for winter games? So when we see a report like the World Meteorological Organization, what you're seeing isn't just another climate story. It's not just another report to be ignored talking about a warming planet that we're used to now hearing regularly. It's a reminder of a critical structural shift that is going to affect the business of sport. And here's the key insight. Sport might actually be one of the first industries where climate change becomes impossible to ignore for investors because you can see it. Flooded pitches, delayed kickoffs, athletes and spectators struggling in extreme heat. Before it even shows up in financial reports, before it gets priced fully into investments, it is showing up in the games itself. So the question now isn't just how sport will adapt, it's who adapts fastest. Because in the future, success in sport might not just come down to talent or tactics. It might be about how well you manage a world that's becoming more and more unpredictable in every passing year. And that changes everything because it's not just about the athletes that are at the heart of it, it's the entire business that's built around it. Story 2, climate change is hitting home runs. More home runs, that sounds like a good thing for baseball fans, doesn't it? Well, not really. Let me explain. The Los Angeles Dodgers home to the most home runs of any major league ballpark since 2020. That is the news story that we are reading. There has been 1,241 balls launched into the bleachers at the home of the Dodgers, which is 20 more than the Great American Ballpark and 25 more than Yankee Stadium. So why are the LA Dodgers getting so many home runs? Talent seems to be the first place for us to look, with the Dodgers manager Dave Roberts saying recently, I think our team is a big part of hitting them. Of course, at the center of their lineup is Japanese sensation Shohei Ohtani, and they do have a star-studded roster. But there's another factor which plays a part in the rise of home runs too. Let me explain a little bit. So a weather pattern known as marine layer forces makes the air denser at certain times, which stops the ball from flying as far as it normally would. But over the last decade, due to climate change, the average temperature in Los Angeles from April to September has risen by 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So even the Los Angeles Angels, who haven't got close to replicating Dodger success, rank 4th on this list with 1,150 home runs, reinforcing the narrative that the California climate dictates how balls fly out of the ballpark. Now, this is a strange story for us to cover, right? We're usually talking about the negative impacts of climate change on sport, and this is a story that seems to denote a positive impact. If you're a baseball fan, you want to see more home runs, right? Fans love big hits and high-scoring games. But let's be clear, this is not good news. The same physics that are making home runs easier to achieve is driving serious risks to sport. If it's measurably affecting baseball in this way, it's affecting far more critical systems too. And this is this yet another example of sport being the canary in the coal mine, us seeing visible impacts very clearly, denoting more serious risks under the surface to critical systems. In this one aspect of baseball, giving us more homers, but the same forces could increase heat stress for players and spectators, including fatigue, dehydration, reduced endurance, and it could also disrupt the schedule and strain infrastructure. Honestly, the burden really isn't worth the benefit here. Can more home runs have a downside? Literally, it's in our a sport idiom of making a home run. It is inherently positive. But some people are already starting to say it can distort competition. So it favors hitters over pitchers, could contribute to less varied play, and is starting maybe to challenge the idea of a level playing field. Also, for this specific example, climate data becomes interesting as a performance analytics asset as well. So the Dodgers and teams who go to play at the Dodger Stadium need to know about this data to choose their hitters. Teams are already optimizing player stats and opponent tendencies. Now they would do well to consider air density, temperature, and humidity as well. A part of this story is that going forward, we can expect hundreds more home runs by the mid to late century due to this phenomenon. But what looks like a golden era for baseball hitters and home runs is, of course, a signal of something much bigger. Climate change isn't just disrupting sport, it is quietly reshaping it, in some cases, down to the physics of the actual games itself. Story 3, you can see it, but it's changing the game in sport. So, what are we talking about here? Every athlete is competing in it, every fan is breathing it. We are, of course, talking about air quality. Air quality in sport isn't new. What is new, however, is treating it as something you measure all the time, not just for tournaments or events that you expect it to be a high risk or you expect it to be problematic when it comes to sport organisers. World Athletics recently announced the launch of phase 2 of its Running for Clean Air initiative, positioning the global governing body of athletics as the first major sports federation to implement systematic, multi-continental air quality monitoring at elite competitions. The initiative is going to monitor air quality at 5 major athletics competitions across 3 continents over 2 years. This year, they're going to be doing it at the World Athletics Relays in Gaborone in Botswana. This year and next year, they will be doing it at Amazing Thailand Marathon Bangkok and Valencia Marathon Trinidad Alfonso Zurich in Valencia in Spain. And that matters. The fact that it's happening consistently matters for a few reasons, because this isn't just environmental data, it's health data and it's performance data as well. When athletes are competing, they're breathing in 10 to 20 times more air than normal. So the pollutants that World Athletics are monitoring via their equipment, like fine particulate matter, like the ozone, like nitrogen dioxide, they don't just affect long-term health, they actually affect performance in the moment as well. We are moving towards a world where air quality sits alongside other statistics, tactics, and fitness metrics as part of how performance is understood and analysed, depending on where competitions happen around the world. This work is funded by the Clean Air Fund and will provide real-time data dashboards accessible to athletes, events organisers, and the public. And this is why it matters beyond elite sport. We have spent years in sport talking about carbon and carbon emissions, which is critical for us who work within sport and the environment. But honestly, it's abstract to the wider population. Air quality can help connect elite sport to everyday health instantly, because whether you're running a marathon or you're just taking your kids to play in the park, you're exposed in exactly the same way. And for us, from a comms perspective, unlike carbon emissions, everyone understands breathing inherently. So if you're an amateur runner or a cyclist, if you are a grassroots or recreational player, if you are a parent thinking about taking your kids to training outdoors, you are thinking about air quality if you hear that it is negatively impacted. It's a gateway issue to a conversation about human health and wider environmental data and climate change that can be incredibly helpful. Air quality is a hook. It's easier to understand than carbon emissions or carbon accounting. It's easier to measure and communicate, and it's easier for us to feel more personally. This can open the door to broader climate awareness, behaviour change, and policy engagement. Air quality is not a standalone issue. It is a systems signal. This isn't even just about clean air, to be honest. It's about uncovering another hidden variable that's already affecting performance, experience, and value in sport. So they are our 3 stories as part of the climate hat trick. Tell us what you think. Tell us about your insights about these stories. And if you have other stories you want us to cover, let us know.